He doesn't say it once. He says it over and over again, as if repetition can turn ignorance into wisdom, as if the louder he says it, the more true it becomes. A stupid man has a script, not a strategy, not a philosophy. A lazy, broken script filled with the same 6 lines that reveal more about his weakness than he could ever imagine. You've heard them. You might have even said some of them. And every time you get further from power, further from control, further from being the kind of man people respect when he walks into a room. Machiavelli warned us, never waste words because what you say reveals where your mind is. And where your mind is, that's where your power begins or ends. The first thing a stupid man always says is, "That's just how I am." It sounds like self-awareness, but it's really self-sabotage wrapped in apathy. It's the anthem of the undisciplined, the coward's excuse to never evolve. When a man says, "That's just how I am," what he's really saying is, "I don't want to change." Or worse, "I've given up trying." He mistakes personality for destiny. But Machiavelli believed that man can mold himself the way a sculptor molds clay. Your nature may push you in one direction, but it's your choices that shape your future. A powerful man studies his flaws like maps. He charts their origins, tracks their consequences, and then he begins the slow, ruthless process of re-engineering them. But a stupid man romanticizes his flaws. He wraps them in pride and calls it authenticity, and in doing so, he becomes a slave to his worst instincts. This one phrase, "That's just how I am," has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. Because at least failure teaches, at least failure humbles. But this phrase, it locks the door to growth and throws away the key. And worse, it teaches others that you have no interest in mastering yourself, that you're not a strategist. You're a prisoner pretending the cage is freedom. Now, listen closely to the second thing a stupid man always says. "I don't care what people think." On the surface, it sounds like strength, but when you dig deeper, it's almost always a defense mechanism. There's a massive difference between not being ruled by opinions and pretending they don't exist. The Machiavellian mind does not ignore the perceptions of others. It manipulates them. It uses them as tools, weapons, mirrors, masks. A fool says, "I don't care what people think," and walks into the world naked, blind to how his image shapes his power. Here's the truth. You should care what the right people think. A general doesn't care what a farmer thinks of his war plans, but he does care what his soldiers think, what his enemies see, what message his presence sends. The powerful man controls perception like a weapon. The stupid man throws it away and then wonders why no one listens to him, no one fears him, no one follows him. Indifference to perception is not power, it's impotence, a mask that hides insecurity. And ironically, the men who say, "I don't care what people think the most," are usually the ones who are most desperate to be seen a certain way. They want to be seen as rebels, as strong as unmoved. But in doing so, they reveal just how easily moved they are. The third phrase is more subtle and even more dangerous. "I already know that." There's nothing wrong with knowing. The problem is using knowledge as a shield against understanding. The stupid man hears advice, insight, or correction, and his first instinct is to block it. I know. He says it quickly, dismissively, like he's trying to protect himself from the sting of not being the smartest man in the room. But Machiavelli understood something deeper. True intelligence is patient. It listens even to fools because every fool is a window into how the masses think. And when a wise man hears something he already knows, he doesn't interrupt. He asks, "How do you see it?" Or, "What do you mean by that?" Because repetition deepens understanding. Because hearing something again from a new angle can unlock something you missed. But the stupid man shuts the door the moment it opens. He wears knowledge like armor, not to protect himself from lies, but to protect his ego from truth. And worst of all, by pretending he already knows, he guarantees he never will. This one habit is the reason why some men stay stuck for years. They read a book once, they watch one video, they have one experience and think that's the whole story. So they stop observing, stop questioning, stop refining, and then they blame the world for their stagnation, not realizing it was their pride that killed their evolution. The fourth thing a stupid man always says is, "It's not my fault." Now this one is a virus. It spreads fast, it infects his relationships, his work, his self-image. Every failure becomes someone else's mistake. Every shortcoming gets a scapegoat. "It's not my fault." Becomes a script he recites so often that eventually he actually believes it. But Machiavelli warned against this very thing. He knew that to control your fate, you must first accept that you have one, that it's yours in your hands, even when things go wrong, even when you're betrayed, lied to, manipulated. If you don't take responsibility, then you hand over power. You declare without realizing it that someone else is in charge of your story. A stupid man refuses ownership, because ownership means blame. But a powerful man embraces it because blame means leverage. If it's your fault, then you can fix it, adjust, reposition, strike again with a better aim. But if it's always someone else's fault, you're forever waiting on apologies, on luck, on mercy. Responsibility is the throne of the strategist. Deflection is the chain of the weak. Number 5 is one of the quiet killers. It's too late. He says it with finality, as if time has already buried his ambition. He sees age as a wall, not a weapon. He sees missed opportunities as dead ends, not redirections. The moment something takes longer than he expected or demands more than he's ready to give, he retreats into the comfort of defeat. But too late is a lie the stupid man tells himself to justify quitting early, because it's easier to say it's too late than to admit I wasted time. It's easier to believe the window is gone than to claw it and saw it open with bloody hands. Machiavelli would never waste time mourning lost chances. He would look for leverage in the present, find the cracks in the system, twist them open, and if the door is closed, he builds a new one or kicks through the wall. The strategist never accepts the illusion of finality. He understands that time is not linear, it's strategic. A move made late but well played can still dominate the board. But the stupid man sees time, emotionally. Regret distorts his logic. And instead of acting now with what he has, he keeps replaying what could have been until one day he looks around and the opportunity really is gone. Not because it was too late, but because he waited too long. The sixth and final thing he always says. That one's more subtle, more seductive, and more destructive than all the rest. But we'll get to that soon because it's not a statement. It's a pattern. A whisper he repeats until it becomes his reality. And the moment you hear it, if you're not careful, it starts sounding common sense. It hides in casual conversations, in small talk, in moments when he thinks no one is really listening. The sixth thing a stupid man always says is, "I'll do it tomorrow." 3 small words that seem harmless, even responsible, but in truth they are a death sentence for ambition. It's the most elegant form of self-sabotage because it wears the mask of planning. It sounds like foresight, but it's actually surrender disguised as scheduling. When a man says, "I'll do it tomorrow," what he's really doing is making a trade. He's trading the discomfort of action for the illusion of intention. He convinces himself that he's still in control, that he's merely delaying. But Machiavelli understood that power does not wait for perfect conditions. Power grows in the present, even under chaos, even under pressure. Every time you postpone, you give your future self a heavier burden, and you teach your own mind that your words carry no weight. You erode your own authority. And the people watching you, they learn not to take you seriously because you don't take yourself seriously. The world belongs to those who act while others hesitate. The future is built by those who move now, not those who promise later. A strategist understands that tomorrow is not real. It's a mirage designed to keep the weak at a standstill. That's why, when Machiavelli spoke of fortune, he said it must be seized, not awaited. Fortune favors the bold, not because boldness is glamorous, but because boldness is immediate. A stupid man waits for the perfect hour. A powerful man creates it. And here's the tragedy. Each of these phrases on its own might seem small. That's just how I am. I don't care what people think. I already know that. It's Not my fault. It's too late. I'll do it tomorrow. They seem like ordinary lines, casual habits of speech, but together, they form a cage. They become the architecture of a mind that will never rise above mediocrity. A mind that cannot hold power because it cannot even hold itself accountable. Words are not just sounds, they're signals, contracts, commitments. When you repeat a phrase long enough, it stops being language and starts being identity. Every time a stupid man says, "That's just how I am," he hardens a part of himself into stone. Every time he says, "I don't care what people think," he blinds another eye to reality. Every time he says, "I already know that," he closes another door to growth. Every time he says, "It's not my fault," he surrenders another piece of power. Every time he says, "It's too late," he hands over another hour of his life. And every time he says, "I'll do it tomorrow," he kills the only moment he ever had, the one he's standing in right now. Contrast that with the strategist. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes. He even feels fear, but he watches his own words like a hawk. He knows that language isn't just communication. It's programming. It programs the mind, the habits, the destiny. So instead of "That's just how I am," he says, "I can change this." Instead of "I don't care what people think," he says, "I will shape what they think." Instead of "I already know that," he says, "Tell me more." Instead of "It's not my fault," he says, "This is my responsibility." Instead of "It's too late," he says, "I'll find a new way." And instead of "I'll do it tomorrow," he says, "I'll start now, even if it's small." This shift is not poetic. It's practical. It's how influence is built. It's how respect is earned. People may admire your victories, but they study your words. Your words teach them how to treat you. Your words reveal whether you're a leader or a liability. A stupid man thinks words are cheap. A powerful man knows they're the first and strongest form of action. And here's the secret no one tells you. People rarely recognize a powerful man by his clothes or his wealth at first. They recognize him by his language, the way he speaks about himself, the way he frames challenges, the way he sets expectations. This is why Machiavelli emphasized appearance and perception. Because power begins not in how you're seen, but in how you speak. A stupid man leaks weakness through his phrases without realizing it. A strategist plants strength into his words until it becomes invisible, natural, undeniable. Most men will hear this and nod. They'll think, "Yes, words matter." And then tomorrow they'll go back to saying the same old things. They'll go back to telling themselves it's too late. They'll do it tomorrow. It's not their fault. And that's why they stay where they are. But the ones who listen, the ones who actually stop and examine the scripts they're running on autopilot, those are the ones who quietly start replacing them. They start saying different things and their lives slowly, but unmistakably start changing shape. It's a strange kind of power because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a dramatic transformation. It's subtle, like a shift in the wind. But give it a few weeks, a few months, a few years, and the difference becomes a chasm. One man keeps repeating the 6 phrases of defeat. The other starts speaking the 6 phrases of power. And then one day the first man wakes up and can't even see the second man anymore. He's too far ahead, too sharp, too untouchable. Machiavelli would have called this self-creation through language. Most people call it self-discipline. Either way, it's the same law. Control your words, and you control your mind. Control your mind, and you control your actions. Control your actions, and you control your fate. Because no man becomes powerful by accident. And no man becomes powerless overnight. It's built, brick by brick, word by word, phrase by phrase. This is why the stupid man's speech is never neutral. It's always eroding something, always teaching his mind to shrink, to hide, to delay. It's not what he does once in a while that defines him. It's what he says every day. Because every phrase is a seed, and the seeds he plants with his words grow into the reality he has to live in. He may not like it. He may blame others for it. But it started with his own tongue. So the question now is not whether you've heard these 6 phrases. It's whether you've said them. It's whether you're still saying them even quietly, even only in your head. Because until you change that, nothing else changes. The habits, the strategies, the opportunities, they're all built on the foundation of how you speak. And if the foundation is weak, the castle will fall no matter how tall you build it. The most dangerous lie a man ever tells himself is that his words don't matter. That's the real trap. Because once you believe that, you stop guarding them. You let them spill out unexamined, unchecked, and before you know it, they've built a life you never wanted. But if you believe the opposite, if you believe your words are weapons, levers, building blocks, then suddenly every conversation becomes practice. Every sentence becomes a move. Every moment becomes a chance to build instead of destroy. And then you start catching yourself mid-sentence. You feel the impulse to say, "I'll do it tomorrow." And instead you start the first 5 minutes now. You want to blurt out, "It's not my fault." And instead you ask yourself, what part of this could I have done better? You are about to dismiss advice with, "I already know that." But you shut up and listen, and suddenly you learn something that changes everything. That's the inflection point. Not some grand revelation, not some overnight transformation, just this moment when your own voice starts sounding foreign to you. When the phrases you once said with pride now make you feel a little sick. That discomfort, that's evolution. It's the sound of stupidity. Dying slowly, quietly, but dying all the same. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He knew that weakness is rarely dramatic. It doesn't come with a bang. It comes with quiet habits tolerated, long enough to become law. A man doesn't lose his power when he gets knocked down. He loses it when he becomes predictable. When his language becomes lazy. When people can anticipate exactly what he'll say, how he'll react, and when he'll retreat. And that starts with the same 6 phrases. That's what makes them so dangerous. They are the language of a man who has given up, but doesn't know it yet. A man who still thinks he's in the game even though he hasn't made a real move in years. A man who thinks he's surviving, but in reality, he's just slowly being outmaneuvered by everyone sharper, faster, and more self-aware than him. The world is full of men like this. They talk too much, they justify too often. They explain away every weakness like it's a badge of authenticity. They speak to defend, not to direct, to react, not to lead. You've heard them at work, at dinner, online. You can hear their whole psychology in the first 2 minutes, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You start to notice how small their world is, how many doors they've closed without realizing. And the worst part, they think they're being real. But authenticity without responsibility is just emotional nudity. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it's completely powerless. So what does a powerful man say instead? He doesn't memorize a different script. He reprograms the way he thinks so that his speech naturally flows from a place of control. It's not about sounding smarter, it's about sounding clearer. Less noise, more intent, less defense, more direction. Every word chosen because it serves a purpose, not because it feels silence. You can feel it when he talks. There's tension behind his words. Not nervous tension, but intentional tension, like he's building something in real time, with every phrase. And the people around him, they lean in. They listen harder because deep down everyone respects the man who speaks with weight, with edges, with consequences. This doesn't mean he talks like a philosopher. In fact, he probably talks less than most people. But when he does, it lands. And it's not just what he says, it's what he doesn't say. He never explains weakness unless it's part of a strategy. He never volunteers excuses, he never argues to prove himself right. And he never utters a phrase that turns his own mind against him. That's the line. That's the test. Try this for a week. Strip out those 6 phrases from your vocabulary, not just in speech and thought. Catch them the moment they arise and replace them with something stronger. Not delusional, affirmations, real actionable reframes. That's just how I am becomes. That's how I've been. But it's not how I have to stay. I don't care what people think becomes. I decide how I'm perceived. I already know that becomes. Let's see what angle I missed. It's not my fault becomes this is my battlefield. It's too late becomes the clock is still running. I'll do it tomorrow becomes even 5 minutes now gives me leverage. It's uncomfortable. It feels unnatural at first. That's because it's supposed to. You've trained your brain for years to find the softest exit, the most socially acceptable excuse. You've repeated weakness in 1,000 polite ways. Now it's time to untrain that word by word, moment by moment, until your mouth only speaks what your mind respects. Until your own internal voice starts sounding less like a critic and more like a commander. Most people will never do this. They'll agree with the idea. They'll share the video. They'll nod and say, "That's deep." But they won't install it. They'll go back to the same phrases, the same tone, the same mental loops, and they'll keep wondering why nothing changes. But for the few who actually do the work, the silence starts to shift. The world starts reacting differently. People speak to them with more care. Opponents hesitate a little longer. Allies listen more closely. And opportunities that once seemed distant begin to move closer. Not because luck changed, but because language changed. Because you stopped speaking like a man who loses and started speaking like a man who wins. This is how real transformation begins. Not with motivation, not with some guru's checklist, but with the one thing you do every single day without thinking, the way you speak to others, to yourself. Power is not something you're handed. It's something you train yourself to carry. And if your words can't carry weight, your life never will. So watch your mouth, because it's not just a reflection of your mind, it's the architect of it. And once you master that, once you purge the stupid man's phrases and replace them with power, you don't just sound different, you are different. And the world responds accordingly. You'll notice it in strange ways at first. Someone asks you a question and you pause. Not because you're uncertain, but because you're choosing your response like a move on a chessboard. You don't rush to explain, defend, or fill the silence. You let them lean into the tension. You let the weight of your words carry forward instead of scrambling to prove anything. And suddenly people treat you like you know something they don't. Because the truth is, you do. You know how to speak like a man who values every syllable. And in a world drowning in noise, that's power. You also start hearing others differently. Their excuses become transparent. You see the fear behind their jokes, the self-doubt hiding in their sarcasm, the desperation behind their bravado. What used to sound confident now sounds hollow. What used to impress you now makes you flinch. Because once you've cleaned your own language of weakness, you can hear it echoing in others with perfect clarity. And that clarity gives you control not over them directly, but over how you position yourself around them. You don't argue with people trying to prove their intelligence. You don't correct every fool. You don't waste time trying to save a man who's addicted to his own failure. Instead, you speak strategically, decisively, like a man building momentum, not begging for agreement. And the irony, that's what gets you agreement. Respect follows certainty, not arrogance. Certainty, the kind that comes from knowing you've filtered your words through fire. Machiavelli would say this is the language of statecraft, not just in politics but in daily life. Every room you walk into is a kingdom. Every interaction, a negotiation, every sentence a signal of how seriously you take your role. When you speak loosely, you train others to underestimate you. When you speak precisely, you train them to respect you, even if they don't like you. That's the goal. Not likability, not comfort, but control, direction, influence. And here's the brutal truth. Most men never learn this. They speak from habit, not from hierarchy. They speak to fill space, not to shape it. They confuse volume for value, emotion for conviction. And in doing so, they surrender the battlefield before the war even begins. You don't have to be one of them. You can build a completely different kind of presence, one that doesn't require shouting, over-explaining, or approval chasing. It starts with silence, not the awkward kind, the charge kind. The kind that lets your mind get there first before your mouth does. It gives your words structure, weight, gravity. People instinctively lean toward that. They don't know why. It's biological. In every social group, the one who speaks least but with most direction holds the highest rank. Watch any room. It never fails. Now, so imagine combining that presence with a vocabulary stripped of the 6 stupid phrases. Imagine if you never again said, "That's just how I am." but instead framed your identity as a weapon you forge every day. Imagine if I don't care what people think was replaced by I control what they perceive. If I already know that, turned into let's refine that. If it's not my fault, became my move, my consequence. If it's too late turned into this timing is mine to bend. And if I'll do it tomorrow was obliterated by action. Immediate, decisive action. What would that make you? It would make you the kind of man Machiavelli would want beside him in a palace coup. Not just ruthless, sharp, unflinching, silent when it's time to listen, surgical when it's time to speak. The kind of man who doesn't need applause because the results speak louder. The kind who people describe with phrases like he's different. He doesn't say much, but when he does, or he doesn't play games. And that reputation, that whisper that follows your name, is worth more than 1,000 speeches. But it starts here with the decision to kill those 6 phrases, to bury them so deep in your past that you no longer recognize the man who once relied on them, the man who always had a reason not to act, not to adapt, not to confront, not to lead. That man has to die, and the grave is dug one word at a time. There's no ceremony, no applause, no obvious transformation, just subtle, powerful shifts. You catch yourself. You edit your mind before your mouth speaks. You pause, you adjust. And eventually, you command, not just others, yourself. You tell yourself to act and you do. You tell yourself to be patient and you are. You tell yourself to move on and you let go. That kind of internal authority is what Machiavelli would call the root of state power. Because if a man cannot govern himself with precision, he cannot govern anything else. And if he can master the battlefield of language, of presence, of timing, then he doesn't need anyone's permission to rise. The world bends to structure, not noise. So here's where it lands. Audit your speech, not for grammar, not for politeness, for power leakage. Is this sentence leaking energy? Is it giving away control? Is it a pre-scripted escape hatch disguised as a personality trait? Ask that every day, because your words are always building something, either an empire or a cage. And once you see that, you'll never speak the same way again. That's when you stop being the stupid man and start becoming the one everyone else watches silently, wondering how he does.